Good, excellent. So yes, the dictionary, whether it's a hard copy or whether it's online, is a tremendous resource, not just for serious historians or academics or anybody wanting to do a bit of work, but also just for people to browse and they can understand the breadth of Falklands history, really, in terms of the people who've brought that history to life and made the islands what they are today. So it's absolutely excellent resource. David was governor of the Falklands from 1992 to 95, which seems like not very long ago, but in fact it is quite a long time ago. He also had ambassadorial posts to Yemen, to the Lebanon, and to Sri Lanka, which was his last post before retirement. And he was also, along with Stefan, one of the founders of the FEMA Friends some 10 years ago. And he only left us as president last year. So, with no further ado, I'm going to pass you over to David, who is going to tell us the story of the Dictionary of Falklands Biography, brackets, including South Georgia, close brackets. Over to you, David.
Thank you very much, Graham. That's very kind of you. Well, I shall try and start PowerPoint now. So I won't be present for my face won't be on for the lecture, but PowerPoint should be there with all its nice pictures. So let's start and see if we can make it work. Nothing happens.
Well, David, we're seeing your PowerPoint. It is up and on, I believe.
Oh
So,
yes, wait, I can see it too.
yeah.
It's on another screen. Yeah.
Can I ask everybody to switch their microphones off for the time being, but put them on again after the show, please? David, don't turn yours off there.
No. Okay, so the Dictionary of Falklands Biography. This slide of Christian Andreasen, I call my inspiration because I saw it in hello? Yeah. I saw it in Stanley, and there was an
David, can
obituary.
I interrupt you just briefly?
Yes.
I think you're probably leaning away from the microphone, so you're
Oh, right. Sorry. I'll stand back.
speak a
Yeah.
little closer to the mic. Sorry.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. The first slide is my original inspiration for the dictionary. It's of Christian Andreasen, a Danish sailor who came ashore at Stanley suffering from vitamin deficiency and was employed by the Falkland Islands Company on their schooner and then at Port St. Carlos. His moment of fame came in 1914 when he spotted the German fleet approaching from his lookout post on Sapper Hill. And he was able to inform Admiral Sturdy by telephone of the size, speed, and bearing of Admiral von Spee's squadron. Norman Cameron, that's Jane Cameron's father, had written a sympathetic obituary in 1962, and it led me to wonder how many other interesting lives had been led in the islands, and thence to the idea of a dictionary of Falklands biography. There are plenty of biographical dictionaries in the world. The original British one, the Dictionary of National Biography, was completed in 1900 with the death of Queen Victoria. It must have helped that V came so late in the alphabet. There were numerous updates, but in the 1990s, Oxford University Press launched a complete revision, which was published in 2004, and which occupies 12 feet of shelving and sells for £1,575. Compared to this, the printed DFB, which has just under 500 entries in the book and a further 68 added to the website, is a minnow beside a whale. But the DFB numbers do represent about 1/4 of the population of the Falkland Islands in 1981, which is to say as though the Oxford DNB had 15 million entries rather than the 60,000 which it has at present. That said, I was very grateful for the advice and encouragement which I received from the Oxford University Press, and they even made their style handbook of around 300 pages available to me. In preparing the book, I decided to cast my net fairly wide, not simply inhabitants of the islands or important visitors, but others who had left their mark on the history of the Falklands. For instance, Samuel Johnson, whose scathing description in 1771 is frequently quoted, usually by unsympathetic observers. Quote, an island which not the southern savages have dignified with habitation. Equally, a number of Argentine leaders, from General Rosas in the 1840s to President Perón in the 1940s, have made threatening remarks which have affected the lives of islanders. And chronologically, the first entry is that for St. Malo, the Welsh saint who gave his name, via a port in Brittany, to the islands in French and Spanish, the Malouines, the Malvinas. It was necessary to set a final date for the book. I wished to avoid including the 1982 conflict, which would unbalance the flow of Falklands history and introduce a host of new players. How would one assess the relevant importance of a heroic sergeant and a senior staff officer? Where would one find authors for the Argentine military? What about outsiders, say the US Defense Secretary Caspar Weinberger or President Mitterrand? So I set a final date of the council elections in 1981. The youngest entrant was Councillor Stuart Wallace, who coincidentally was said to be the youngest elected official in the Commonwealth when he was first elected to Lejko in 1977. I decided that those subjects who are still alive would be invited to write their own biographies. It's a system that works reasonably well for who's who. And the only problem was that some of those who wrote themselves up, I'm thinking of Governors Hunt and Hascard and the FIC manager Frank Mitchell, were all too modest about their own contributions to Falklands history. On the website, some editorial comments have been added to make up for people's reticence. In general, I prefer to wait until someone has died before commissioning an entry. It's hard to be objective about the living, and it's reassuring to know that the dead cannot sue for libel. One or two people simply declined to take part, but we could include them once they had passed on. Over 100 people contributed essays to the DFB. None received any payment, but thanks to the generosity of Stanley Services Limited, each received a copy of the finished volume. I am very grateful to the authors. In addition, I received financial support from the Falkland Islands government, from the Shackleton Scholarship Fund, and the Foreign and Commonwealth Office, and I'm grateful to all of them. I also received enormous help from successive archivists in Stanley. I visited the islands in 2007 and was able to work in the bright new archives building, helped by Jane Cameron and Tansy Newman. Since then, the current archivist, Chloe Anderson Wheatley, has been a great help in finding material for the website. The Falkland Islands government is really fortunate in having such exceptional staff to manage its archives. The final volume was designed by Rob Still of Wild Guides Limited, and he also arranged the printing. I thought he produced a very handsome volume, about 500 pages, and certainly everyone has been very polite about it. The printer's van deposited a heap of books in my study. My wife wrapped them, and I posted them out one by one to subscribers. Mercifully, they weighed just under 2 kilograms. The price plus postage was £35. I see that copies are now advertised on the internet for up to £200. I was asked why a book and not a website. 20 years ago, I had little notion of how a website could be set up or managed, so I plumped for the medium I knew. Since then, I've learnt a little, and I've been encouraged by Dr. Stephen Palmer, the research assistant for the DFB, to include the entire text of the book in a website. We've been fortunate to be assisted by Tom McAdam, who has designed the site and keeps it neat and functional, a thoroughly competent webmaster. The website is capable of near infinite expansion. We've added 68 new names and over 1,700 new illustrations. It's enabled us to make good the deficiencies in the printed volume. Several reviewers commented that the DFB was a little thin on South Georgia, and we've now included numerous whalers and naturalists who were active on the island, helped by the great historian of the southern whaling industry, Ian Hart. Stephen Palmer has been assiduous in collecting further illustrations, often by contacting the families of people concerned with or through sustained exploration of the internet. Last year, the DFB website had 27,025 hits. Most came from the UK, but there were 795 from the islands and even 846 from Argentina. One of the objectives of the dictionary is to correct the bombastic and inaccurate historical account of the dispute still promoted by Argentine nationalists. For example, last year, we posted the biographies of Henry Southern and Felix Arana by two leading Falklands historians, Dr. Graham Pascoe and Peter Pepper. Southern and Arana were the two signatories of the Convention of Peace, a treaty of 1850 by which Argentina dropped its claim to the islands, to revive it briefly in the 1880s, and then more seriously under President Perón in the 1940s. I do not expect a miraculous conversion, but I hope that over the coming years, intelligent Argentines will come to realize that the historical narrative they've grown up with is fundamentally flawed. At some stage, I hope we shall be able to include the new names and updates in a supplement to the printed dictionary. Let me move on to sample some of the characters in the DFB, starting with the first governor. Richard Clement Moody. Moody was a 28-year-old lieutenant in the Royal Engineers when he took up his post in Port Louis in January 1842, in what one official in the Colonial Office called a Robinson Crusoe colony. Moody was fortunate to head a small detachment of sappers who provided him with a force to ensure law and order and skilled craftsmen to construct the basic buildings for the colony. By April, Moody had completed his general report on his new parish. He was optimistic and pointed to the possibilities for sheep and the value of tussock grass as fodder for animals. However, a week after he had completed his report, this man arrived in Berkeley Sound, Sir James Clark Ross, commanding the Antarctic expedition of Her Majesty's ships Erebus and Terror. Sir James, reputedly the handsomest man in the Navy, was not impressed by the new colony's meagre resources or its callow governor. He declared that the capital was in the wrong place and should be moved to Jackson's Harbour, the present Port Stanley. 2 years later, the Colonial Office agreed with him, and Moody was obliged to leave Port Louis and establish a new seat of government, which he named Stanley, after the Secretary of State for the Colonies. The colonies soon acquired a magistrate, a parson, and a doctor, and an executive council was established. It would be good to report that these arrivals made Moody's life easier. But the fact is that he feuded with most of them, in particular with this man, the parson, who was also his brother, the Reverend James Leith Moody. This portrait of him on the stamp by Jamie Peck is necessarily vague because no one knows what he actually looked like. The parson's behavior became increasingly erratic, not to say deranged, but he remained in the colony longer than his brother and only left in 1854 when the succeeding governor eased him out. One other character from the earliest days of the colony is worth noting, Antonina Roxa. Although we don't have a portrait of her, I found this gaucho in an Argentine book, A History of the Pampas. I think she's female and as close as we can get to Argentina, a lady gaucho. Antonina was reputedly an Indian princess from Argentina or Uruguay who came to Port Louis in 1830 to join Louis Vernet's settlement and soon made herself indispensable. The Royal Navy officer in charge in 1839, Lieutenant Lose, described her as a very humane and good character, and particularly useful in the colony as a doctrix, that is a female doctor, and midwife. Governor Moody reported that she was employed as a gaucho, being an active person, riding as a man, astride, not side saddle, and tolerably skillful in the use of the lasso. Antonina had an arrangement with one of the naval officers that she might keep the second calf of every cow which she tamed. She amassed a good number of cattle that way, which worried a later naval captain. He queried the arrangement with the admiral at Rio de Janeiro, who in turn referred it to the Admiralty. The Admiralty passed the buck back to Governor Moody, who decided in her favor. Antonina was the first person in the islands to swear an oath of loyalty to the crown, and in 1850 she applied to be naturalized as British. Married twice, she leased a station of 6,000 acres in her own name, north of San Carlos, in 1866. She was buried in Stanley Cemetery 3 years later. She's one of the most memorable figures of the early years of the colony. The Falkland Islands Company was incorporated and received its royal charter in 1852 and acquired the broad acres which the Lafone brothers had purchased from the Crown. FIC had a succession of managers, some very able, others less so. I want to look at the life of William Dale. William Dale, who was appointed FIC camp manager by his father, who was the company's colonial manager and incidentally married to a Lafone lady. This was in 1852. Will Dale was an amateur artist of some skill, and his paintings give us an idea of camp life in the mid-19th century. Here we see a rodeo, a roundup of cattle, of the wild cattle which the FIC was farming at that stage. On the right, a figure in European costume is, I think, Will Dale himself. Sorry, I've gone too far forward. And on the left, you can't see it, perhaps fortunately, a bull is being castrated. This is the next slide, which is a painting Will Dale did of life in the shanty. You'll see that the two men, one is handing the other a gourd which contains mate. Mate was a tea-like drink which was the preferred tipple of the gauchos. Notice the straw or bambilla or bombilla or bombilla in the Argentine pronunciation, which is coming from the Gaul. It's ironic that Will Dale, who went home to get married, incidentally to his stepmother's sister, Harriet Lafon, in 1868, and then returned to Uruguay, died in 1870 from a stumble while drinking mate, and the bombilla punctures his throat. Another artist, a professional one this time, who visited the islands was Eduardo De Martino, an Italian naval officer. He painted this view of Stanley Harbor in 1865, and FEMA friends purchased the original from a Mrs. Elizabeth Bamford of Stroud in 2017. We had it professionally cleaned and framed before presenting it to the museum in Stanley. It's a lovely picture, and this is his ship, the Italian corvette, and in the background is a Dutch freighter which had caught fire, and you see it has no topmasts; they've been dismantled. And you can see Stanley well. This is the exchange building. And this is the central store, which is now the museum. And now there's another picture of Stanley. This is the FIC offices in Stanley, recognizably the same today. A nice picture, nice watercolor. De Martino's career changed radically after his visit to the islands. His ship ran aground in the Straits of Magellan, and he was blamed for this. So he decided to resign from the Italian Navy and become a full-time artist. His large seascapes appealed to Queen Victoria, and she appointed him court painter in ordinary. And here you see him at work in the 1890s. He did enormous seascapes, which obviously became very fashionable. De Martino features among the newcomers who we've added to the DFB website. And while researching him, I was delighted to come across this sketch of one of the most fascinating characters in the early history of the islands. William Horton Smiley was born in Providence, Rhode Island, around 1792. From the late 1820s, he sailed to the South Atlantic and Antarctica, trading, sealing, and whaling. The establishment of British rule in the Falklands restricted his freedom of operation, but he was treated with wary respect by the Royal Navy and by the governor in Stanley. A meeting with Governor Moody cleared the air. Moody wrote with admiration of Smiley's activity, skill, courage, and enterprise. In 1851, the US government appointed Smiley their commercial agent in the Falklands, but he was involved in several tangles with the colonial government and the Falkland Islands Company. As perhaps the most experienced navigator around the islands and on the Patagonian and Tierra del Fuego coasts, he was often appealed to rescue the crews of shipwrecked vessels, and he proved remarkably competent in these missions. During the American Civil War, that's 1861 to 1865, Smiley passed an uneasy 4 years at Stanley, when it appeared that Britain might join in on the side of the South, and his ship might be confiscated. But when he died in Montevideo in 1868, there was universal regret on the islands. And the text with the sketch in Italian, De Martino says that all seagoing people regretted his death. So he's a very interesting character. Now, this is my next choice. This is Governor Allardyce and Lady Allardyce, Lady Constance Allardyce, sitting in the conservatory in Government House. He came to the islands in 1904 and stayed until 1915, that is, after the naval battle of the Falkland Islands. He's probably the most outstanding of all the tenants of Government House, and Dr. Stephen Palmer wrote a long and admiring entry about him in the DFB. When he arrived, the whaling industry was just starting its operations in South Georgia, as well as in New Ireland off West Falkland. Allardyce insisted that the new industry must be brought under government control and instituted a system of licensing for whalers. He was equally concerned with the raids on fur seal rockeries. In 1911, new whaling regulations were issued to ensure that whale carcasses were fully used and to limit the number of whale catches. Allardyce was concerned that the colony's income from whaling would soon evaporate if conservation measures were not enforced. Unfortunately, with the outbreak of the First World War, whale oil became valuable as a source of glycerine for making explosives, and the restraints on the industry were relaxed. The outbreak of war was critical for the islands. A British fleet under Admiral Cradock came south to challenge the German East Asia Squadron under Admiral Graf von Spee. Cradock's fleet was defeated at the Battle of Coronel off Chile, and he and hundreds of his men were drowned, and the colony seemed open to invasion. At this time, Allardyce wrote a frank and fascinating letter to a former colleague. Describing the threat, he said, "You will see that the quiet, easygoing, domesticated Falklands have been upheaved." Concluding, he wrote, "We're not out of the wood yet by any means, and we may yet have to defend our shores." This letter only surfaced recently. It was bought by FEMA Friends in 2023 and donated to the museum in Stanley. You can read it in full in the Falkland Islands Journal of 2023. In the event, the Falklands were rescued at the last moment by the arrival of Admiral Sturdy's fleet with two powerful battle cruisers, which steamed into Stanley only hours before the German fleet arrived. But Sturdy was to destroy the German fleet almost totally. This postcard describes the battle on half a slide of paper. You can see all the ships involved, and the 4 German warships which were sunk are these 4 here, von Spee and Sturdy. Sorry. How do we go backwards? Sorry, I have to start at the beginning, I think. And
You could start at the beginning and just quickly flick through them.
yeah, that's what I'm trying to do.
Yeah.
Oh, God, come back.
Yeah, we've lost.
Yes, I can see. I'll try and start from the beginning. There we are. Right.
Okay. So you're not sharing your PowerPoint at the moment.
Ah,
So if you hover over the lower menu bar, you should see that green button. I don't quite know why it's not sharing, but it's not. You could try pressing that share button again if you can see it.
no, I can't see the green button. It's not come up.
Right. Um, mm. And I think the other possibility, as we mentioned when we had this slight trouble earlier, was that your PowerPoint might be lurking underneath uh,
Yes.
the Zoom. So if you've got any way of moving your Zoom display, you might find that the PowerPoint is under there, and you just need to press go or something. I'm not quite sure.
Oh, wait a sec. I've got share. I've got share. Share.
Good.
Are you there? Are we seeing it? No.
Well, we're not seeing your proper slideshow. We're seeing your slides with your notes and your prep area and so on.
Yeah.
So I think if you go to slide in the top menu, move along to your right there. Try pressing on slide and see what happens. Can you see slide?
Yes.
Try pressing on that. It should say start slideshow bottom left or just lower left.
Yeah.
Did you press that? Oh, there you go.
Can you see it or not?
Yeah, but it's very small. I don't understand.
Yes.
Is it filling your screen? That's better. And if we have to leave it at that, we will leave it at that. But we're seeing your note slides on the.
Yes, I see that. I see
I
that.
think perhaps we'll just be happy with that, should we?
Yes, let's do that. So yes, here is the battle on a postcard.
Mm.
And there we have the British battle cruisers, the Invincible and Inflexible, which did all the damage. Um,
Can I just interrupt you for a minute?
yeah, sure.
Is anybody else an expert on PowerPoint? And I think that David needs to
Yeah.
go to the slideshow again, and there should be a
Okay.
little control up there. But is anybody else?
Yeah.
No.
David,
Yes.
in the top left corner of your screen, you've got an option from beginning or from current slide.
Yes.
You click from current slide, that will take you to the current slide in your show.
And then maybe left and right.
No,
I've just done that, but nothing's happening. It's blank.
There's
Blank.
end of slideshow. You certainly don't want to exit. To be okay. There we
Oh
go.
no.
All right, Graham,
The slideshow.
How's that?
bottom of the screen.
So Nigel, go ahead, please.
Yeah, at the very bottom of the screen, there's on the right-hand side, there's like 4 little icons.
Yeah.
Yes.
Move 2 or 3 to the right. Keep going. Next one. Click that.
Ah, brilliant. Is that good for you?
I think that's certainly better.
But I've got it as a whole screen.
Yeah, we don't. We've got
We
the next slide as
don't.
well. Nigel, any further ideas? Because that's certainly an improvement.
Okay. No.
Shall I fly ahead with
Let's
that?
stick with that because that's pretty good.
Okay.
Let's stay with that. Thanks, Nigel, and thank you, James and Liz.
Yes, thank you very much. So Allardyce had a number of other achievements as governor. The school leaving age was raised to 14, the new hospital was finished, the senior school was completed, and work was begun on the new town hall. A radio station was opened, which proved invaluable in 1914. And when we began the new DFB website, we found space for a separate entry by Dr. Phil Stone on his wife, Constance Angel Allardyce. Constance was an Australian who married William while he was serving in Fiji. She was keenly interested in geology and natural history and collected numerous Devonian fossils from strata on Pebble Island. One trilobite was named after her, and this is it, Metacryphaeus allardycea. She went with her husband to Bermuda, and she was one of the first recipients of the new Order of the British Empire decoration for her war work. When she died, relatively young, in 1919, her American collaborator, the geologist John Clark, wrote in an obituary, "The name of Constance Allardyce, wife of Sir William Allardyce, will not go unrecorded in the annals of science. The writer gratefully recalls her enthusiastic aid in assembling the fossils of the rich and remarkable Devonian fauna of the Falkland Islands. The collections gathered by Mrs. Allardyce are the basis of pretty much all that we know today of the ancient life of these islands, and her name and services have been permanently interwoven in the geological story of the Falkland Islands. So that was a nice tribute. Now, to show that the DFB is not just about governors and admirals, let me take you to this man, John James Davis, generally known as JJ or Cracker. John Allen and Jane Cameron, both alas no longer with us, wrote him up for the dictionary. He's recorded in photographs by a professional Swedish photographer, Sven Gilseter, who visited the islands in 1968-9 and whose excellent colour photographs have been presented to the museum in Stanley. Sven himself features in the DFB in an entry by his son Bjorn. Cracker Davis, here with a leg of lamb, I guess, leg of mutton, was born in Stanley in 1893, the son of a shepherd who was also a sailmaker. His mother, a widow, already had 4 children when Cracker was born, and Cracker was the eldest of 10 by her second marriage. He had an early interest in boats and was master of the cutter Indiana, running general cargo around East Falkland. In 1924, he bought a larger craft, the 24-ton sailing ketch Perfecto Garcia, which enabled him to cover West Falkland as well. In 1952, he became part owner of a considerable vessel, the Protector III, which was an ex-naval minesweeper. But as the years passed, he could no longer afford the engine repair costs. So Protector was towed to New Island and beached below the settlement, where she still lies. The next picture shows Cracker in glasses, surrounded by his family on New Island, which he had bought in 1949. I'm afraid I cannot name children and grandchildren relaxing here. Cracker was renowned for his hospitality on New Island, and in 1957, a Soviet research vessel was based there to receive signals from the first man-made satellite, Sputnik. I assume the governor knew all about this. Cracker was a hard-working man who also played hard and drank accordingly. He was known as the last of the Falklands pirates and flew the Jolly Roger from his masthead. While people in camp appreciated his punctuality, it was reported that having delivered a cargo, he might reload part of it the following night and sell it on to some other unsuspecting farmer. Cracker died in 1969 and found his final berth in Stanley Cemetery. I was once invited to give a lecture, and the title I chose was Biographical Dictionary of an Uninhabited Island. The organizers lacked my sense of humor, and the invitation was not followed through. But the island is, of course, South Georgia, and it's attracted many remarkable visitors, some of whom, I'm thinking of the Norwegian whalers and the bass scientists, have spent years on the island. The 2 star visitors to South Georgia are, of course, Captain Cook and Ernest Shackleton, but I shall not attempt to describe them as they each have several full-length biographies, though they are covered in the dictionary. I want to sketch the life of Carl Anton Larsen, the Norwegian who brought the whaling industry to South Georgia and founded the settlement and factory of Grytviken. Born in 1860, Larsen went to sea as a boy and was soon given command of a whaling vessel hunting the bottlenose whales in the North Sea. In the early 1890s, the Norwegians turned their attention to the Southern Ocean and Larsen led an expedition which found plenty of whales. In 1901, Larsen captained the ship carrying the Swedish explorer Otto Nordenskjöld to the Antarctic. The party visited South Georgia and studied the north coast in some detail before turning south again to Antarctica. Here, rather as a forecast of Shackleton's misadventures in endurance, their ship was trapped and crushed by the ice, and they were obliged to overwinter. They were eventually rescued by an Argentine ship and taken to Buenos Aires. Larsen turned his brief stay in BA to advantage because he was able to interest some Scandinavian businessmen in the possibilities of South Georgia as a base for whaling. They set up a new company, the Compañía Argentina de Pesca, the Argentine Fish Company, and Larsen collected men and materials from Norway to return to Grytviken, one of the harbours he had prospected with Nordenskjöld. Here, Larsen constructed a considerable industrial settlement with docks and plants to strip the whales of their blubber and process it into oil, plus ship repair yards, living quarters, and even a church. Larsen ran Grytviken for 10 years and returned south in 1923 with a factory ship, the James Clark Ross, which showed the way for the next great expansion of the industry in the south, pelagic whaling, or whaling without a shore base. Larsen died on the whaling grounds in 1924. He had been responsible for the birth of shore-based whaling in South Georgia, and by pioneering factory ships, he was to prepare the way for its death. Behind this rather stuffy and respectable face is a sailor of courage, an explorer of iron resolution, and a businessman of real vision. Finally, let me introduce you to this man, Duncan Carse, who might be called the uncrowned king of South Georgia. Born in London in 1913, Carse went to an English public school and served an apprenticeship on a square-rigged vessel before joining the Royal Research Ship Discovery and sailing south. He spent 3 years in or around Antarctica before coming north to work for the BBC. In 1942, he joined the Navy as an ordinary seaman, and wearing the white ribbon of the Polar Medal, he seemed destined for the Russian convoys. But in fact, he was too much of an individualist to prosper in the Navy. He was, to use a military term, stroppy, difficult, obstructive, and he ended up commanding an armed trawler in the Western approaches. After the war, he returned to the BBC and, along with 600 other hopefuls, applied for the role of Dick Barton, special agent. Carse was chosen. At this point, I should be able to play you the hectic notes of The Devil's Gallop by Charles Williams, which introduced each 15-minute episode and closed it, leaving Barton in a desperate plight, from which in the following episode he was able to leap free. It's sad that you have to be my age or older to remember the series and the disappointment, even rage, which we 12-year-olds felt when it was replaced by the Archers. Carse soon found more congenial work. He was selected to direct the South Georgia Survey, and in 4 southern summers between 1951 and 1957, he organized and led this project. Not a surveyor himself, he chose a good team, and in 1958, the Directorate of Overseas Surveys produced the first proper map of the island at a scale of 1 to 200,000. That's about 3 miles to the inch in old money. Carse probably knew South Georgia better than anyone else alive, and he paid 2 more visits to the island and was lucky to return alive from each of them. Early in 1961, he decided, quote, as a personal psychological experiment, to live entirely alone during the southern winter. It was a well-planned operation with a prefabricated hut and plentiful supplies. But in May, a freak wave, perhaps from a distant tsunami, swept into the bay, destroyed his hut, and scattered his stores. Cars survived, but lived a very rough life until a sealing vessel rescued him. 12 years later, in December 1973, Cars decided to reenact Shackleton's epic trek across South Georgia of 1916. HMS Endurance dropped him at King Haakon Bay on the south coast, Shackleton's starting point. But high on the glacier crossing, he was caught by a blizzard, which lasted for 2 weeks. He had to return the way he'd come and was picked up by the Bass research ship John Biscoe. Hero worship of Ernest Shackleton was a theme running through Cars's life, and he hoped to play the lead role in a film about the 1914 expedition. But it was not to be. He never lost his love of South Georgia, and indeed his proprietorial feeling for the island. Anyone planning an expedition to South Georgia would do well to consult Duncan first. When I was planning the DFB, I rang him to ask if he'd like to write his own biography for it. He told me politely but firmly that he wasn't interested in that sort of thing. A few months later, I found his obituary in the paper, and Geoffrey Hattersley Smith composed a full entry. Of the many people who passed through the uninhabited island, Cars perhaps had the fiercest and least mercenary love for it. And I leave you with that thought. I encourage you to visit the website, just Google Falklands biographies, and to recall the occasions on which FEMA friends have been able to present the museum in Stanley with interesting and valuable objects. Thank you.
David, thank you so much. That was absolutely fascinating. I'm going to ask you to turn off, if you can do that, please, your PowerPoint, so that we can bring you up and people can see you in full Technicolor. And yeah, just switch off the entire program, I think. Yeah, you're still sharing the screen. I'm going, okay, so I'm going to try and, if you can stop sharing your screen, that would be a useful thing to do. See if I can.
If I could do that, I would. Don't worry.
I've done it for you. You're fine.
Thank you. Great.
And it's nice to actually prove that I can actually do something on this program rather than appeal to the audience to help. Let's bring you up to your full size. Well, that was really fascinating. Thank you very much. And I was interested in every single one of those personalities. Moody has always interested me because he was so incredibly young, and he didn't look like a terribly fit pioneer to go to the far South Atlantic, but he was very interesting. And you then went to the other sort of extreme in social terms and picked on my great uncle Jack Davis.
Oh, I didn't know he was your great uncle.
Yeah, he was my great uncle, and I remember him vividly.
I would have been careful.
Because I think he's an interesting example of the way sort of legend and myth have kind of burnished him a little bit, but in actual fact he was a complete old rogue, and the way in those photographs is pretty accurate. But every Christmas he would come into town wearing a blazer and grey flannels and look remarkably respectable rather. But he once told me that his great trick when he was negotiating some sort of dodgy deal, which was inevitably done in the Globe Bar if he was in Stanley, was that he would wear thigh-length rubber boots. And if anybody was trying to get him so drunk that he couldn't make a good deal, he would be tipping his drinks down his thigh boots. So he sort of maintained his sobriety and therefore got away with the best part of the deal. But he was an old rogue, and I wouldn't defend the chap at all, actually. But that was the way, that's the way some people lived on those very, very isolated islands. Good. So this is a chance for anybody to ask David a question. So raise your hand, or if you switch your microphones on, please, then you can actually just shout and I'll highlight.
Yes.
So yeah, I'm trying to get, yes, and I'm trying to scan. Has anybody got a question?
David.
James, James and Liz, go ahead, please.
Yes, well, thank you, David, for that introduction, teasing introduction to all the riches that the dictionary has to offer. And you and Stephen must be congratulated for all that you've already provided. But what do you think the priority should be now for new lives that would come into the dictionary?
What a good question.
Well, I mean, there is new life in the shape of the 67 or 68 newcomers who we've put on the website. They're not sort of listed as newcomers, but they're there. If there's a name that interests you, try it. But you know, we have to be reasonably selective. We can't put everyone in. But if you have any ideas, let us know.
Criteria.
Well, there are so many people one could nominate. Would you have somebody like Malcolm Barton, for example, who from afar has done a lot of work in enhancing the collecting of the Falkland Islands?
Yes, I mean, yes, he has done a great deal. I mean, he's a resident of this country, isn't he? But so are several people who never set foot near the Falklands. Yeah, but also he's still alive.
Yes, thank heavens.
Yeah.
So years to be dead.
We'd be interested to hear other people suggested.
Yeah, indeed. Has anybody else got suggestions? Let's have a show of hands. Neil, let's spotlight you as spotlight. There we go.
Thank you, and David in particular for such an enthralling talk. Thoroughly enjoyed it. Can you tell me how, I mean, because I'm a little bit behind on things, how I can access your biographies?
Yeah. Yes, Neil, it's very good to see you. Just Google Falklands biographies, and the dictionary of Falklands biography will come up. And then you simply, if there's a name, you simply click on the name. There's a box will come up, and you put the name into that, and it will come up.
Thank you.
Colin Young. Colin, I'll take the spotlight. I'll try and put the spotlight on you if I can find you. There we are, Colin. 1 second. Yeah, go ahead, please.
I'm terribly dark. I don't know why. There must be a power cut in Aberdeenshire or something. But I was quite fascinated by the way that David brought to life the names, just words from the blank page, and how animated it all seemed to come when you're actually talking about it rather than reading. I found it quite fascinating historically to note a few interesting things. Firstly, that I see that the FIC offices have not changed very much in profile since the 1800s, which rather startled me, to be honest. I saw that the Protector was lying in the beach at New Island. I have somewhere in my monstrous archive of slides a photograph of her actually being towed out, I think by the Philomel, but I can't remember that for sure, being towed out to be beached. And I think she was initially beached out next to the Great Britain and Sparrow Cove, but Cracker must have been quite sentimental and shifted her from there and taken her out back to New Island, presumably for sentimental reasons, which may seem odd to some people. I was also quite startled at the idea of Cracker appearing in Stanley in blazon flannels. It didn't seem to be quite the way I remembered her for sure. But just a few comments on all these things that managed to bring an awful lot alive for me, I must say, and stirred a few memories. Thank you very much indeed, David.
Well,
Pleasure.
the blazer and flannels incarnation of Uncle Jack Davis really was for Christmas lunch. He'd always be in Stanley for Christmas, and that's when he seemed to scrub up quite well, but it was fairly brief before he was back in the Globe.
I can imagine that.
You need to put your hand on the actual thing,
Yeah.
you know.
So
Hi.
1 second.
Yes. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you. Wanted just to add that tribute to David for the work he has done. That is phenomenal. Just as editor, I mean, as good evidence of that in the number of art since the DFB started, the number of articles we get in the Falklands Journal, which it spawned, and the huge proportion of them just acknowledge the DFB as their source of information for various articles on the history of the Falklands. It's just absolutely tremendous resource, and David is just to be wholly congratulated for this. It's absolutely superb, and just to reiterate, from the journal point of view, it's been an absolute godsend in the flow of articles and the quality of them we've had thanks to that resource. So thank you, David.
Well, thank you for those kind words, Jim. Coming from you, I really appreciate them. And I mentioned in the talk, but I should recall my gratitude to your son, who's done this terrific job in managing the website. And really, if we'd had it done professionally, it would have been way beyond our means. So he's been very good to us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Right, I'm scanning along to see whether anybody else has a hand raised, either digital or actual, or just wants to shout out if you've got your microphone off.
James Dawson.
This is Jim Dawson. Back in 1964, when I was a fourth-year student at UCLA, I was part of a geology expedition to the Falklands. And in October of that year, we took the Darwin from Montevideo down to Stanley. And Jack Davis was also a passenger on the ship. And we got stuck in a storm for about 5 days and couldn't get to Stanley. So we all got to know each other pretty well. And it turned out that we had made our accommodations to stay at the Jubilee House with none other than Lena Davis, who turned out to be Jack Davis's daughter, one of them. Lena would have been in her early 80s when we stayed with her. Of course, Jack was up there as well. I don't remember what year that would be. We can figure it out. But we were there for the 64, 65 year. And later I used that work to, I finished my undergrad. I became a grad student and finished my master's degree using that work. So.
Thank you. Well,
small world.
Cracker Davis has really illuminated the session.
Yeah.
I think, Graham, you must add a note, a comment to the website entry for Cracker.
Well, perhaps I will indeed. Yeah. But he was ubiquitous, that's for sure. And Lena was also my great aunt, and she was Jack's sister, in fact.
Oh, sister. Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, that explains the age. Okay.
Yeah, that's right. Good. I'm scanning along. Stefan actually raised an arm there. I don't know if he was stretching or if he was going to say something.
I was just stretching. Hard life in Fox Bay.
Yeah, well, okay.
Are you in Fox Bay, Stefan?
Yes, we are. Yeah, both you and I are here.
Great. Very good.
Good.
Yeah.
Stuart Dewar, I'm going to highlight you because you definitely are not stretching. You have got your arm up, I'm pretty sure.
There he is. And he's muted.
Let's see and stuff.
Unmute.
I think Stuart's back now.
Stuart, you are muted. If you can switch your microphone on, please. Still can't hear you. No, no.
We need to turn it up.
Yeah, your microphone is actually switched off. I can see from the screen that it's switched off. So bottom left-hand corner is a little button that says audio. If you press on that.
Don't you love technology?
You're there.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you what, we'll move on and come back to you, Stuart, when you've got yourself unmuted. Is that all right? Okay? We'll come back to you in a minute, I hope. Right, in the meantime, have we got any other... now Stuart's
Nice.
side, he's horizontal. Okay. Anybody else got any questions? Perhaps for Stuart. I'll ask one unless I'm scanning along. It's not, there isn't an efficient way of seeing everybody with a hand up. But yes, some time ago, David, you sent a note out to a number of people, myself among them, seeking or having a dialogue really about how best the online version or the online resource could be protected into the indefinite future. And because of course we just don't know what technology is going to, what's going to happen in terms of technology, and even the web is vulnerable. Things can be lost, websites can be attacked, and so on. I'm just wondering whether you took that idea any further and decided on how you could ensure its life in perpetuity.
No, I mean, I think on a purely technical basis, it must be possible to sort of duplicate it, or something I should ask Tom McAdam about. But what I think both Stephen and I are thinking of is that we should really transfer ownership or management of the website down to the islands. And we've had some preliminary talks, and Jim McAdam has very kindly spoken to people there. And we're looking at possibly making the museum responsible for it, which would keep it. I mean, I think people generally agree that it shouldn't become an arm of government. It should be at one stage removed. And that would be, I think, a fairly sensible base. It will probably always need some sort of representative in this country to chase up odds and ends and to seek agreement from people to write articles.
Duplicate archives are a good idea.
Yes, the thing is that the archives are actually an arm of government, which the museum isn't. The museum is at one stage removed.
I
think we felt this was a good idea.
Graham.
Yes, Stephen.
It is a problem because, or potentially it is a problem because the speed of change with the internet and being able to manipulate that thing. Tom McAdam, bless him, does a weekly complete backup of the whole shoot thing, which I've had to use on several occasions when I've managed to make horrendous mistakes and crash the damn thing. So there is at least a full backup of the website as a website. The second thing to say is that all the material of particularly the photographs or the images, of which there are now nearly 2,200 or something like that, are all on a USB stick and are in the archives. So that's two things we have been able to do. Then the thing I wanted to say was the curious thing, at least it is to me. I'm no computer expert. Tom's held my hand on numerous occasions. If you go to any of these characters and you go onto Wikipedia, it's very interesting. Wikipedia has a kind of algorithm that how things appear when you first put a search in for, let's for argument's sake, Duncan Cars. it depends on very often how many people have tried to find it by other means. And what's very interesting to me, anyway, is the number of times over the last 5 years, almost always the very first entry in the Wikipedia search for whomever is the dictionary. And that is a reflection on the fact that people have been consulting it all the time. And Tom McAdam told me that the other thing that makes it, you get farther up the list of names, is it depends on the number of times, A, the dictionary is consulted, and B, the number of times it's updated. Because there are millions and millions of sites available on the website, on the internet, that never get updated. But because we've had such a rigorous updating, which goes on, I mean, I've just put another one in today. Because of that, and because the number of times that people have consulted it, it's now becoming the go-to place for quite a lot, if not all, of the names. So if you put Allardyce in, for example, the very first thing you'll see is the dictionary in the Wikipedia listing. So in a way, it's a kind of tribute to the website.
Mm.
Yes, so basically the internet has worked very well for the dictionary, really, hasn't it? And had it not been, well, had you had to rely totally on ink and paper, you would have had to print another version, publish another version very expensively. But I can see it's a tremendous asset, the website. I do look at it from time to time. It's brilliant.
Yes, I mean, I think we may get round to doing a printed supplement. But the website, as you say, is one can always keep it up to date, can always expand it, and it's ideal from that point of view, and it's freely available to everyone.
Yes,
which is not quite true of the
David,
British Dictionary of National Biography.
David, the other thing that's worth saying is what has surprised me over the last 5 years is we get quite a lot of comments, do we not? You can leave comments on the website, and I was expecting when I started to help David, a sort of fair number of what can only be described as mass hysteria from Argentina. Not so. Very, 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 very quiet, and they've not come back on anything, including the recent two, which Peter Pepper and co have produced. It's quite interesting that the hysteria, there's been no hysterical reaction to it, no rude and sarky comments. I find that quite interesting.
Mm.
Well, I suspect that has something to do with the fact that the book, readable though it is and enjoyable though it is to browse, it has an academic feel to it. There is no jingoism really in the dictionary, and I think that therefore that it doesn't provoke any jingoistic or nationalistic response, perhaps.
Yeah.
Mm. Good. Well, looking at my watch, remarkably, we've been David's been entertaining and informing us for rather over an hour now, and I think we've all been enjoying it for the same amount of time.
Mm-hmm.
So, if you could do me give me the pleasure, please, of putting your hands together, I'd very much appreciate it. But put your microphones on, folks. Anyway, David, thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Thank you for making it all possible.
Good. We have one more talk. That's a week from now, next Thursday. Stuart Lawrence, the captain of RRS Bransfield and various other Bass ships. He spoke to us some time ago about his early career, but next week he's going to be talking about how coming to the end of a nice, peaceful and successful season of Antarctic support in 1982, he and his ship, the RRS Bransfield, ran into the invasion of the Falklands, and that's going to be, I think, an interesting and entertaining story about how Bransfield found herself in the wrong place at the wrong time, and how Stuart got out of that one. So thank you all for coming. It's been fascinating, David. Thank you very much again. And I'm going to begin the countdown to switching us all off. I'm going to wish you a very good night, and whatever you've got planned for the evening, enjoy it.
Yep.
Goodbye, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Goodbye, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, David.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, David. Wonderful.